Welcome. Thank you for joining us for First Person Conversations with Holocaust Survivors. I'm Bill Benson, and I have hosted First Person since it began at the museum in 2000. Each month, we share firsthand accounts of survival during the Holocaust. Each of our First Person guests serves as a volunteer at the museum. We are honored to have Holocaust survivor Ray Goldfarb share her firsthand account of the Holocaust with us. Ray, thank you so much for agreeing to be our first person.
Thank you for having me.
Ray, you have so much to share with us in our short 1 hour, so we'll get started. You were born in Dokszyce, Poland. Will you begin by telling us about your hometown and your early life there with your parents, Beryl and Dina, and your younger brother, Shlomo?
Dokszyce was Poland at the time, but it's Belarus now. The town is about between 4 and 6 kilometers from the Russian border, and they had a military presence. They had barracks. Life was very comfortable. They were approximately half the population of Dokszyce was Jewish. Most of them were I should say the majority of them were involved in either commerce or the trades. And Poland at the time was a semi-democracy under Pilsudski.
Tell us about this picture. What is it? What are we seeing here?
This is a photo of a synagogue in town. There were, I think, 3 or 4 synagogues. It was built out of logs because a lot of the buildings were built out of logs and also any kind of wood. Very little was brick or stone.
Beryl, you mentioned that many of the Jews that lived there were in commerce of one kind or another. Your father, Beryl, and your mother, Dina, both had businesses. Will you tell us about your parents and their work?
My mother had a fabric store. She sold wholesale and retail. My father was involved in buying some cattle and orchards. He shipped some out to Germany and provided the meat and produce to the military garrison that was near town. Life was very comfortable. We had much help. I had a governess. My brother had also somebody taking care of him. And my fraternal grandmother lived with us, and she basically ran the household.
You started school quite young. Tell us about that.
My father was involved in establishing a modern Hebrew school. And of course, if you start a school, you have to have students. My governess had taught me to read rather early. So at the age of 3, I was enrolled in school. The subjects were taught in Polish and Hebrew, and I became multilingual. I had no difficulty in school because most of the kids were starters, and I was even ahead of the class.
So you not only were multilingual, but you could read in different languages.
Yes, I did.
Ray, your father died, though, when you were very young, just 4 years old, I believe. What do you remember about your father, and what do you know about the circumstances of his death?
According to my mother, my father was on a business trip delivering stuff to Germany, and he was visiting a group of Jews who were expelled from Germany. And conditions there were not very sanitary, and he got sick. I had some sort of an infection that was not curable. It was pre-penicillin. He died at the age of 37.
Nazi Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. The Soviet Union had signed an agreement with the Nazis, and on September 17th, the Soviet troops occupied your hometown. What do you remember about the Soviet occupation?
I remember that my aunt came knocking on our door to tell us that the town was occupied. We looked out the window and I saw a tank. That was the first time I ever saw a tank.
Mm-hmm.
And conditions changed rather quickly. The Soviets don't believe in commerce of any kind in private hands.
Mm-hmm.
They confiscated the businesses. My mother was not even able to manage the store. The communist parties believed in no private ownership. They actually imported people who were assigned or took over the management of the businesses. We were not allowed to have any help in the house. My mother never cooked. She had to learn a little bit about housekeeping. Conditions for me, I had to attend a Russian school, which was, well, a Russian managed school, which was a secular school. The Russians did not believe in any kind of religion at that time. They were totally agnostic. And as a Jew in general, I was not treated extremely well, and especially being the youngest amongst the students. Also, they started indoctrination rather early.
Mm-hmm.
In elementary school, they introduced the what they call pioneers, the lowest level of the Communist Party. And if you were Russian, you automatically became a member. Other than that, as a bourgeois, I wasn't even considered to be a party member. And those were the privileged in the classes. I strive to be amongst those, and the only way I could achieve it is by getting excellent grades. I finally got into the group and was given the red kerchief and the hammer and sickle ring to hold it. I came home and my mother tore it off my neck. So don't you ever wear it in the house.
So for a short period, you were a pioneer.
For a short period, I was a pioneer.
In June 1941, Nazi Germany launched an attack on the Soviet Union, and the German army entered your town. By the end of that year, your family and the other Jews of Dokszyce were forced to live in a ghetto, an area where the authorities concentrated the Jewish population and restricted your daily life. What do you recall about how your lives changed once the Germans took control?
When the Germans took control, the first thing, schools were forbidden to Jews. I was not allowed to go to school anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Within a short period of time, every Jew had to be identified by sewing on a yellow Star of David, a six-cornered star, on their clothing, front and back, even on inner and outer clothing, but also on inner clothing. Jews had to vacate the sidewalk if soldiers were on it. And even the Gentiles would push us off into the gutter. I remember asking my mother that I wanted to have clothing that were with prints on them in different colors, so the yellow star wouldn't be so visible, because I was ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
I also remember being pushed into the gutter. The gutters were not very clean because most of the transportation was by horse and buggy and horseback. And after a rain, you can imagine what the streets were like. I remember coming home and crying because my shoes were very dirty and smelly.
Because you were forced off the sidewalk to get into the street just because you're not allowed to be there while others were walking. You shared with me, Reyes, about a German officer from the First World War that your grandfather, I believe it actually housed him. Tell us about that.
My grandfather said that the German army won't be so bad because Germany was very much civilized. He remembered they housing some German officers during the First World War. And as he was walking on the street, he saw an officer, a rather high rank officer that he recognized from the First World War and tried to approach him. But the officer turned away very quickly and shook his head no. He came later on to my grandfather's house and told him it's not the same German army and not to approach him anywhere.
That's a remarkable incident to recall. Thanks for sharing that one, Ray. When the Nazis established a ghetto that you were all forced to go into, in your case, your home happened to be where they created the ghetto. So you stayed in your own home, but what changed for you and your family in your home once the ghetto was created?
Once the ghetto was created, the whole population of town, several thousand people, were forced into just a couple of blocks. Housing became very crowded. I remember sleeping in my mother's bed, not head to toe, but crosswise, like sardines. And also people had bedding on the floors that they had to roll up in the morning so there would be room to move around. Rations were very short. People were taken out to work. The ghetto was structured in such a way that the Germans appointed a committee to sort of, quote unquote, govern themselves. Jews were counted. They had to come to the plaza between the synagogues to be counted and were taken to work. If you went to work, you had a bigger portion of bread. Mother went out to work as laundress, and men would be taken to work on the railroads and build roads. The roads were not very good for the German communication because there were not many cars and definitely no tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And the German army was mechanized. So they put the Jews to work to build the roads. They counted them when they left, and they counted them when they came back. And if some were missing, they were retributions.
Ray, the Germans began taking large groups of people out of the ghetto and killing them in mass shooting operations. What did you and your mother hear about those mass killings?
Not just my mother and I, but a lot of it is my speaking to my mother actually in the later years of her life about just how things happened. And from what she described is that under the disguise of resettlement of Jews to a larger ghetto, they took a number of Jews. They asked them to pack some belongings even to make it appear like they were really going someplace, and took them to a pit and summarily executed them. I don't know exactly how many, but there were several hundred. The next time they asked for people to come to the marketplace to be counted with some belongings, people were not coming. And they would go house to house and pull people out. From what I remember, the last sort of never knew about a resettlement, just rumors that something was going to happen. And we heard actually the population was helping the Nazis, that they were taking people away. We went into a hiding place that was constructed years ago, I guess, by my grandparents, my grandfather. There was a fake space, I should say, fake walls between the house and the warehouse, and covered by the roof, so it looked like one structure. And there was a space between the two walls that was, I guess, a couple of feet wide. It wasn't very wide because we couldn't move around easily. And we, as many people as could get in and get away, went into that hiding place. We stayed in that hiding place, and we heard people being taken away and looting going on. Some people could not stand it very well and started to get out at night, hoping to escape. We never heard from them. And as far as I know, none of them survived. I know that my grandfather went out much later to assess the situation and intended to come back and report to us, but he never returned. Little by little, the hiding place emptied of people. The only ones remaining was my mother, my brother, and I, my maternal grandmother, and two children. I don't even remember whether they were related or not. I understand from my mother that we hid there for about 8 days. And then we thought it was very quiet for several days, that it was safe to get out and try to escape. And we got out at night. My mother went first, took me down. It was a rope ladder that we used to get in and out of this hiding place. And the two children went out, and my grandmother was going last, so she could retrieve the ladder and hide with us or get out with us. However, we all of a sudden heard a noise in the house. People, I guess, thought there was still something to be taken. We also had another hiding place, which was a root cellar right off the kitchen. And we climbed into the root cellar. My grandmother, being the last one, heard the people very close by. She quickly covered the entrance there and went out, and she was taken.
So your grandmother, essentially, she sacrificed herself in order to protect what was left of her family.
Temporarily save us.
Yeah.
We stayed there the whole day, and then the next night we ventured out.
So Ray, just to kind of recount that, for 8 days, those of you who were still there had remained in this narrow space, hiding for 8 full days. Circumstances must have been really difficult in there. I can only imagine.
I know that there was dried bread there and some water, but sanitation was very poor, and it became impossible to stay any longer, that's for sure.
How did you manage then to escape the ghetto?
At night, my mother figured the best place to get out of the ghetto was across one of the borders, was the river Belarus, which ran through the town and was closest to some of the villages that my mother knew, farmers who were friendly with us. Actually, we went to one of the farmers whose son and my brother used to play together, and the farmer agreed to hide my brother to shelter him. My mother left my brother with them, and then she took me to another farm, also where they had a girl that I used to play with. She would come into town, and I would occasionally go to the farm. And she fed us, and she was looking for lodging for us. And the next thing she heard is that my brother was exposed, and the farmer was beaten up, and my brother was taken away. And she urged us to leave because she didn't want to suffer, and she didn't want us to be taken away. She informed us that the best place to hide would be the bathhouse. Farmers did not have bathing facilities in the houses, and would have go to the bathhouse on Saturdays to clean up for Sunday. And so nobody would use it for several days. We went to the bathhouse and we hid there. She came back at night, the next night, and she told us that my brother was taken to our hometown, and that she did not hear anything good. And she was afraid for us to stay. She brought us some bread and told us to please try to get someplace where we would be further away from our hometown and maybe safer. We walked by night and hid in the cornfields by day, and we reached a farm that of a French. She was actually a French woman who married a Polish soldier and came to his farm. And the man happened to die, and my father helped to save the farm. And she was helpful, but she was afraid to hide us. Mm-hmm. And she actually helped us get to Głębokie, which was a town further away with a large ghetto. And she said the Jews there seemed to be better off. She managed, well, her son took us dressed in her clothing and her daughter's clothing on market day, and we mingled with the farmers until the Jews from the ghetto were coming back from work assignments and managed to get into the ghetto.
Ray, before you continue on about that, let me ask you, when did you learn what actually happened to your brother Shlomo, although you knew he had been taken?
One of our stops at one of the farmers was the woman that took care of my brother. She did not have any children, and mother asked her if she could go into town and find out what happened to my brother. We hid for the day. She went into town, and she said she was going to try to convince them that she raised my brother, and she felt like it was like her son, and she would like to raise him as her son because she had no children and couldn't have any. She came back and told us that she learned that my brother was shot. She actually gave us the date, June 8, 1942.
So, Ray, after you learned what happened to your brother and know exactly the date that he was killed, you and your mother ended up, as you were starting to describe, in the ghetto at Głębokie. Tell us what, as you described it, you sort of mingled in with the Jews of the ghetto who had gone out to work for the day, came back. Now you're in the ghetto. What was that like?
Well, we had no documentation, and everybody had to be counted and accounted for. Mother managed to get documents for herself and me. She figured that if I could go out of the ghetto to work, we would have a better chance to escape. And so she got documents for me that I was 2 years older. I was 10 at the time. She got documents that I was 12, so I qualified for work. And I was able to be assigned to a spinning mill. As you can see, the Jews were identified very easily with their yellow stars. My job was to tie the the yarn, the threads that broke. So I'd run around amongst the spinners and tie their cut or torn threads. That gave me a portion of bread and also the ability to leave the ghetto and to come back.
So Ray, just so I understand, the reason your mother wanted you to be older was in order for you to be able to get some kind of work, which then led to a little bit more rations, a little bit more food for you, and as you said, the ability to go back and forth. In getting a different getting these papers, I assume that meant you had a new identity or a different identity.
It just so happened that I got papers from someone who was taken away, and without her papers, and needless to say, she perished. And I was given those papers. It happened that her name was also Rachel, and those are the papers that I used. And she was 2 years older, which made it very convenient. Her mother was looking for papers that made me older, and that gave us the ability to venture out to work. And therefore, my mother was planning our escape.
So and of course the additional benefit of not having to answer to a different name to make it a little bit easier, so you could continue as Rachel. Yeah. Ray, your mother was just very determined to get out of this Glenboca ghetto. Tell us how she made that possible for you to escape from Glenboca and to then connect with partisans or resistance fighters that were operating in the woods outside of Glenboca. Tell us how she made all that happen.
Mother was pretty resourceful. During market day, she managed to contact some farmers who were friendly. It wasn't that everybody was unfriendly. It's just that they were very much afraid of exposure by those that collaborated with the Nazis. And actually, one of my father's friends who came to the market, and mother was able to connect with him, managed to get a gun to her, a German Luger, in a basket of eggs. The idea of the eggs were that the Nazis would not try to unload the eggs first to try to see what was underneath. And mother brought it into the ghetto. They allowed the Jews to procure some food from the farmers. The farmers wanted to be able to sell some of the foods. And that was her idea of how to be accepted by the partisans. We knew about them because the Germans mistreated the prisoners of war, and they ran en masse. Many of them got killed, but some of them managed to escape. And the area is full of pine forests, so it's easy to hide in that kind of forest, because if you've ever been to a Christmas farm, you know that the branches grow very low to the ground and you can hide under there. Mm-hmm. And the partisans, they escaped prisoners of war, banded together to fight the Nazis.
You and your mother make your escape. You walk out and you go in search of the resistance fighters in the woods, and you found them. And so tell us about this photo, and then tell us, how did they receive you? Here comes a mother and a child looking to join them. How did they react?
As you see, their rifles were not plentiful. The ones in the front have the rifles, in the back they didn't. A gun was a very big gift
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that give them some sort of protection to exist. We were met with we came upon what was called Spetsgruppe, or here you would refer to it as a reconnaissance group. And Mother said she had a gun, which meant that she was willing to fight. And they took the gun from her. They said that the men needed that to fight with, but she offered to be their cook and I would be her helper. The partisans, mainly what they try to do is interrupt the progress of the Nazis to the front lines. Remember, that was pretty early. That was the summer of 1942, before the United States entered the war. They would disrupt the community, cut the telephone wires, and dislodge the, what do you call it? The ties under the railroad tracks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the trains would derail. They managed to grab some ammunition, and also that would delay the progress to the front lines.
Do you remember, Ray, what your life was like with your mother living within the resistance group? They wanted her and you to cook for them. What was life like for you?
Not very pleasant, but then again, I had enough to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I would forage in the forest with some of the farmer kids for mushrooms. It was an area that had many bogs and cranberries in season. And the farmers basically did not resist very much the partisans because the Germans would not go in the areas and take away their cattle and their grain. So they cooperated with the partisans. Sometimes we slept in barns, and sometimes we had to sleep under the pine trees, or the partisans had also made shelters sort of into the ground, covered with pine branches, in case they had to hide if the Germans happened to be in the area. So, I mean, I did everything that was asked of me to do.
At some point, Ray, you became quite ill. Tell us what happened.
Well, sanitary conditions weren't very good, and typhus was rampant. It was transmitted through lice, so you can imagine if sanitation was missing, that many people got sick with it. I happened to get very sick with it because the conditions were not very good for me as a Jew there, and always afraid that somebody might recognize. My mother was very much afraid to be recognized and exposed in some way. And when I got sick, Mother was looking away to get some help because many people just died. There was a woman that Mother knew, a friend of hers, who was actually a midwife and managed to escape from Glumboki and was in the partisans. Since they didn't have doctors, she became the medical professional. She became the doctor to tend to wounds in a makeshift hospital in the forest. And this is not a picture of her. This is a picture that was taken by someone in a similar situation.
But literally, when you say field hospital, in this case, you are literally in the outdoors.
In the outdoors, and also a barn was taken over nearby. And I don't remember anything from that period other than that I finally came out of it. And from what this woman Rachel happened to be her name too, told me later on when I met up with her that I couldn't talk when I finally broke the fever and I couldn't walk. And she had to get me back to on my feet to be able to walk and to talk. Mother was not with me, but also at that particular time, the Germans were forced to retreat. And what the Russians were pushing from the front, and the partisans were fighting the Germans in the back. The Germans decided to try to get rid of the partisans and send soldiers out to look for the partisans who dispersed amongst the population. So we were left without any protection at all. And Mother and I managed to mingle amongst the farmers. But what they also did is they basically chased all the farmers off the farms and took us to our hometown. Everybody was housed in a warehouse, and my mother and I amongst them. We had no food, so somebody had to go out look for food. Mother was afraid that she would be recognized. She wore what we called a babushka, basically a kerchief that covered everything but the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And so she would not be recognized easily. Needless to say, she didn't look the same, that's for sure. They were also separating men from women. And my head was shaved. I was dressed in boys' clothing, and I was being sent to the male side. They were arguing amongst themselves, the Germans, whether I'm a girl or a boy. Yiddish is very similar to German, and I picked up some German in the couple of months that we were under German occupation. And when I heard that they are arguing, and they said that they decided that I was a boy, a young, I said Mädchen, which meant girl. So how do I know German? I must be Jewish. They put me on the gallows and threatened to hang me unless I told them the truth. Mother ran out. She heard about it. And she offered herself to be hung first because I'm her child and she doesn't want to see me hung. I guess they must have relented because both of us survived.
You and your mother were liberated in the summer of 1944, but you continue to experience overt anti-Semitism in Poland, where you were at the time. The two of you would make your way to Italy, and after the war was over, you lived in two displaced persons camps, or DP camps, before you were able to emigrate to the United States. Tell us what made it possible and how you made it to the United States.
We basically traveled throughout Europe to try to get to the Allied side. Excuse me. Most of the Eastern countries we traveled through were under Russian control. We finally got to Austria, and with the help of some of the organizations that were formed to get Jews to Palestine, we ended up going through the passes in the Alps to come to Italy. And we crossed into Italy at Padua. In Italy, there were organizations. There was UNRWA, and there was also the Jewish organizations, Hayas and Joint, which helped. We lived in barracks, and it became difficult to go to Palestine because the British blockaded the seas to enter. Mother knew the address of my aunt, my father's sister, who emigrated to the United States in the late 1920s. She remembered the address because she corresponded with my aunt. And the only thing she didn't remember was the DC. She wrote letters addressed to Washington without DC, and they always came back, no matter how many she wrote. They came back no such address. She finally was able to note that there was a Jewish paper available, a New York paper that was delivered to the camp in Italy. And she wrote a letter to them stating that she was looking for a sister-in-law and brother-in-law that emigrated to Washington. And my uncle saw it and contacted us, and eventually made application for our entry into the United States. He had to promise to, in the application, he had to promise to give us shelter, food, medical help, clothing, and education for me, and deposit $5,000 in 1947, 46, 47. $5,000 was a fortune.
Yes.
He actually mortgaged his store in order to bring us to the United States. But that alone wasn't enough. We had no documents, no official documents. Mother found out that the Red Cross was issuing documents, and this is a copy of it, that with the stamps, when you go through immigration, you have to have your documents stamped. Also, the Polish quota was full, and my mother learned that the Russian quota had ample visas. She went to Naples to the council and convinced him that actually she was born at the time it was Russia. So he took out the map and she named all the villages surrounding Dokszyce to the east, which of course were under Russian rule at the time of her birth in 1906. And so we came to the United States on the Russian visa.
I have just one more question for you. As we face rising anti-Semitism, related conspiracy theories, and Holocaust denial, please tell us what we can and need to learn from what you experienced during the Holocaust.
All I can say is that hate destroys. And the perception of hate comes from stories that are passed down through generations. Not necessarily true stories, but perceived. Anti-Semitism is still in existence. And when I'm asked about it, I say that we all pray to one God, no matter which form or which church we go to or synagogue we go to. The precepts of religion is all the same. We all refer to the 10 Commandments. It teaches tolerance. Religions teach tolerance. However, people interpret it sometimes the wrong way. I feel that if we continue to look for faults in others, we are blind to our own faults. You have to feel that how would you feel if someone does the same thing to you that you do to someone else? Hate will destroy you. Love will save you.
Ray, thank you so much for those closing words, and thank you for taking the time. I know there was so much more that you could have shared with us, and hopefully we'll have another chance to hear even more from you. Thank you, Ray, so much.